And thank you for arranging this wonderful event. It's always a joy and a privilege to speak up for Israel. I bring with me greetings from Norway, where we see a steady growth of support for Israel. Our organization, MIF, Med Israel for Fred, With Israel for Peace, is now the biggest non-religious and political independent pro-Israel organization in Norway. We are soon 11,000 due-paying members. Our goal is, through factual and comprehensive information about Israel, the Jewish people, and the Middle East, we seek to create a deeper and greater sympathy for Israel and the Jewish people. Through our webpage, with more than 130,000 visitors last month, and the books and magazines we publish, we try to bring the Israeli perspective in a public discourse. We're also a watchdog and corrects both media and politicians when they are biased against Israel. I don't tell this to boast about us, but to encourage you that it is useful to speak up against anti-Israel bias and to stand up for Israel in the public debate. More and more often we experience that media, our government, and other politicians look to our organization to hear the Israeli perspective. And just to illustrate, 1 month ago I participated in a debate on the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation against the leader of BDS Norway. And you know, BDS, that stands for Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions. He was arguing for a boycott of Israeli wine produced on the Golan Heights because Golan Heights Winery, who produce wonderful, tasty wine, is located outside the so-called 1967 borders. First, let me tell you, there are no such thing as the 1967 borders. Yes. What politicians call the 67 borders is actually the 1949 armistice line. And the Arab countries argued that these lines should not in any matter be considered as political or geographical borders. Do you know why? Because then the Arab world would have to accept Israel as a legitimate state with legitimate borders. And that is the core of the conflict. The Arab and Muslim world's rejection of a Jewish state, no matter how small. If Israel could shrink to be down to the size of only Tel Aviv, it would still be too much. So, well, I told the radio listeners that in Israel they have been producing wine since biblical days, including on the Golan Heights. And if Israel should accept the insane demands from the United Nations to withdraw completely from the Golan Heights and to the so-called 67 borders, which actually is it's more correct to say suicide borders or Auschwitz borders, that would mean bringing both Assad's regime, ISIS, Al-Nusra, and about 60 other competing armed groups, all down to the lake Kinneret, called Genesaretsjön, you know, and which would bring the civil war to the city of Tiberias and large parts of the Galilee. And I can't see why the United Nations should want to expand the territories of one of the world's most failed states at the expense of the only well-functioning liberal democracy in the Middle East. On the Israeli-controlled Golan Heights, there are beautiful vineyards and agricultural land, but on the Syrian side, you will see death and destructions. So which side do you choose? You must remember that the United Nations is not a high moral judge. It is in fact an organization highly biased towards Israel, which turns a blind eye to the breaches of human rights from the Arab and Muslim world and concentrates much of its effort to condemn the only democracy in the Middle East. So why should you support Israel? Well, because it's the moral thing to do. And you people, you are here. You are on the right side of the moral fence. Finally, let me give you 3 important facts which you can bring with you today and which is easy to remember. Number 1, there is only one state in the whole world with a Jewish majority and identity, Israel. At the same time, There are 22 Arab states and 57 Muslim states. The Palestinian authorities define themselves as both Arab and Muslim. The Palestinian Authority, at the same time, they refuse to accept Israel as a Jewish state. So this kind of hypocrisy is a big hindrance to peace, more than anything else. So, only one Jewish state. Number two, the Jews represented about 2% of the entire population in the Arab world at the time when Israel was established. The area which was given to Israel was less than 0.2 of the Arab area where Jews lived inside. After 1948, about 1 million Jews was displaced and had to flee the Arab world, and today almost no Jews are left behind in the Arab world. Israel is now a safe haven for most of the Jews from the Middle East. And number three, 3%. 3%, that is the area which the Israeli settlements are covering of the West Bank, the historical Judean Samaria. Only 3%. When you listen to the media, you should think that they almost had all of it. It's only 3%. Settlements, only 3%. The very same day that Palestinians are willing to accept the Jewish state, it will be possible to find a solution which can clarify the final borders. Until now, the Palestinian authorities have declined the solution with 2 states as long as one of them is to become a Jewish state. So this is why you need to rise up and take a stand for the only true democracy in the Middle East, for the only Jewish state in the world, Israel. Thank you very much.